Welcome to FYI. I'm Barry ZeVAN, and thanks for joining us again. If this is more than the second time you've watched, we're always happy to see you, and always happy to see also a lady named Diane Dettmann. She's an award-winning authoress. I like to say authoress. I'm old-fashioned.
Thank you.
And thank you, Diane. I got to meet Diane. She has written, by the way, 5 books. 5 books. I've written just this one, about which we'll be talking later, but it was wonderful because I met Diane at a book signing that I was doing up in northern Minnesota, and she bought my book, and she and her husband now have read it, and we can talk about that later, of course. But then I was very interested and excited to see that she had authored 5 books. I cannot even imagine it. But we were at the Strawberry Fest recently out in Stillwater. No, in Afton. That's right, yes. Afton, Minnesota. And just spent 2 days learning all about her books. So Diane, please tell us, first of all, how you got interested in writing anything.
Well, I'm so glad to be here, Barry, and I'm looking forward to this so much. I got into writing because I've always actually loved it ever since I was a child. I can remember writing little notes on rainbow tablets and reading them to my friends. And then throughout my life, I did some journaling, and it came and went. And then when I got into the University of Minnesota and then on to Hamline University during I was able to become involved in a class called Her Story. And it was this class that focused on the history of women in education. And so I interviewed my Aunt Miriam about her experience going through the public schools in Embarrass, Minnesota in the 1920s. And from that little kernel, it turned into a book, and that's the first book I wrote was MIRIAM, Daughter of Finnish Immigrants. And then I also had the first Hamline Journal published a little piece of this story, and that's kind of what inspired me to keep writing, because it was something that I really enjoyed, and then actually having some of my work published was just a real inspiration for me.
Well, I think it's interesting, though. So you were a school teacher.
Yes.
And what grades did you teach? And
I taught in the St. Paul Public Schools my whole career, and I worked with 1st through 5th graders as a classroom teacher. And then the last 6 years of my time in St. Paul schools at Bruce Vento Elementary, I was a literacy trainer. So I would go to national conferences, learn techniques for teaching reading and writing, and then come back and train teachers and model lessons in the classroom. So it was a very, very positive experience, and I enjoyed it very much.
Well, words have been your life.
They have, they have. And I learned a lot as a writer going to those national workshops, because they had major presenters there that were, published authors, and then going back to the classrooms and teaching the younger students about writing really was very inspiring for me there too, because they gobbled it up. They just enjoyed it so much. So
I love it. Tell us first about your first book, please, and what title, etc.
It's called MIRIAM, Daughter of Finnish Immigrants, and it's about my grandparents coming from Finland in the early 1900s and then settling in Embarrass, Minnesota in the 1920s, where they raised 7 children during the Great Depression. So it's a book about immigrants, which is a topic now that is very relevant, and it gives the history of the family and how hard they worked, the jobs my grandfather had to take in order to keep the family going and to survive up there in that cold climate in the winter, and then the lack of growing crops time, that it was a very short growing season. So they were very hard workers, and they had what the Finns call sisu, which means they have determination and the ability to rise above hardships and difficult times. So that's basically these are my great-grandparents. This is taken in Finland, and it's told from my Aunt Miriam's point of view, and it focuses a lot on the schools of the time, the education process, because that's where it came from initially. The little kernel for it was from the Hamlin Herstory class for education.
Wonderful. I'm very familiar with Embarrass, and maybe much of our audience is too, because when I was doing the weather, or doing in the weather, depending on your perspective, Embarrass was so often the nation's coldest town, the coldest temperature overnight, in the 40s and 50s below.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How could they even survive that? Is that addressed in your book?
Yes, it actually has a few small photos in the book of the homestead and how they actually purchased 25 small plot of land. My grandparents, my grandmother and grandfather, started their married life in Ely, and then when the first child was on the way, they decided they needed to move to a bigger home. And so they had a two-bedroom house or two-room house dragged to the property of, they bought 25 acres up front. And it was, didn't have any insulation. So it was, but it was considered a deluxe house because of the fact it had two rooms and not just one. Yeah, so and from there they just basically built a life up there, and eventually had a farm with, expanded the acreage, and were able to have like dairy cows, dairy cattle, and a few other types of critters up there. But it was really a short growing season. Rutabagas and potatoes were about the main thing that would last and grow up there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
Incredible. Book number 2, what would that be out of your 5 books?
That would be my memoir, 28 Snow Angels, A Widow's Story of Love, Loss, and Renewal. And it's a book that I wrote. It took 7 years to write.
Oh my gosh.
It's a very personal story, an honest account of the death of my husband in 2000. He had died at the age of 54. And the 28 in the title comes from the number of years John and I were married. We actually met at a bar dancing one night here, kind of in this general area. It was called the Rusty Nail is where we met. And we kind of hit it off. And so we got married in 1972, and we thought we're going to have a long life together and that type of thing. But he got very ill in 2000. He was born prematurely in the 40s, so his lungs weren't very strong and well developed. So all through his life, he had difficulty with his breathing and his respiratory system. But he looked at everything was a glass half full, and instead of empty. He had a very positive attitude.
Wow.
But then in 2000, in June of 2000, he got very ill, and he was in and out of United Hospital, and then he died at home at the age of 54.
So sorry.
Thank you. It was, and we never had children, so I was pretty much hanging out on my own. I was teaching full time, and I took that literacy position 3 weeks after John passed, after the funeral. So it was kind of I thought maybe switching jobs and getting into a new environment would help, but it was really stressful for me. But eventually it worked out. So I do a lot of grief outreach with 28 Snow Angels. I present at the Koch Funeral Home in Cottage Grove every year, and they enjoy having me back because the book it's an honest portrayal of what I went through in terms of the grief, and then how I came back in terms of rebuilding my life, which the book mostly focuses on. My current husband read the draft of the book before it went to publication, and his advice to me was, well, make sure they have Kleenex for the first couple chapters, but remind them that I'm the humor in the book because it talks about dating online. Towards the end of the book, I deal with that, and then that's how I met my current husband on Match.com back in 2006. So
you actually give talks about grief in grief counseling, etc. Right?
I do, yeah. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a professional person in terms of grief, but the groups like having me come because I've actually experienced it, that I've gone through the journey, and I came out on the other side. So
oh, thank goodness you have, and it's been a pleasure to meet Alan too. What a wonderful guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, he was with Anderson Window Walls for a lot of years, right?
Yes, he was almost his whole, well, yeah, his whole career. And he's a wonderful guy. I'm just very blessed to have met him. So
No,
worked
we're
out
blessed
well.
to have you.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So from Snow Angels, we go to fiction.
Yes, I took the leap from memoir to historical fiction. And I thought, well, fiction, you can just make it up, is what the first thought I had. I thought, this has to be true because it's about whatever, me. And then I started thinking, okay, and I got into historical fiction. Well, that requires a lot of research, especially this World War II era. So the first novel, Courageous Footsteps, a World War II novel, took 3 years to write because I had to do so much research in terms of the war, and it takes place in the Japanese internment camps in this book during World War II, and starts right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, when the Sakamoto family, they have 2 teenagers, and the parents are taken from their home along with thousands of other Japanese Americans and imprisoned in the camps. And so the book really follows this family to the camps, and then talks a lot about what they left behind, and then it just shows how many hardships they were forced to endure during that time. And it's a story that a lot of people, at least I didn't know much about it until I started really reading all about the Japanese internment camps. Because when I went through high school, that really wasn't in our history books back when I was in high school. So, and it's inspired by a Japanese family that lived across the street from me in Minneapolis when I was a little girl. And I was best friends with the daughter in the family, and both her parents had been imprisoned in camps. And I didn't know that at the time, but all I remember is the young girl being picked on a lot at school, and kids kind of harassing her and that type of thing. And I didn't really understand why they were doing that. So I dedicated the book to Art Matsura and his family for just inspiring me to write the book. And he just passed away not that long ago, and I think he lived to be 99 or 100 years old.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, a little sidebar here, as I occasionally do.
That's fine.
About a year ago, we're taping this in mid-July, but about a year ago, I was in Charlottesville, Virginia, visiting a lady to whom I was introduced by a fellow named Ardashir Zahedi. He was the ambassador from Iran to the United States. And Ardashir had amassed a great collection of very interesting people during his ambassadorial days in Washington, D.C., and all over the United States, really. And one of them was a lady who actually, her father was the commander of the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor on December 7th.
Oh
And she said that they came within a mile of being bombed. And of course, it was a big surprise. They had no idea what was happening. But she's one of the last survivors in the civilian side of being in Pearl Harbor on that day. And she told me that they were just absolutely terrified. His name was Barringer, was Admiral Barringer. But yeah, and she later married a fellow named Reutersschild, who had shortened his name to Reuters, and he created the Reuters news service, which we know today. Yeah, and she lives on a mountaintop outside of Charlottesville. So it was a very interesting few days to just, reminisce about the old days.
Absolutely.
Especially World War II. That
Yes.
was, quote, my war. I was born in 1937,
Right.
and so I remember, it's my first memory. In fact, it's in my book. The first memory that I have is the announcement that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And my mother came over to my little bed and was crying and said, "Oh, my poor baby, I hope you never have to go to war." And I'm thinking to myself, well, of course, in those days, at age 4, I would not be thinking. But in later years, I thought, maybe she didn't realize they didn't draft anybody at age 4. It'd be a few years. God bless her heart. She was very warm-hearted.
It sounds like it from the book. After reading the book, I got that feeling about your mother.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you. So what followed the first book?
Okay, the second book is YASU'S Quest, A Tale of Triumph. And this carries the main character, Yasu, from the camps. She manages to get out of the camps early, and her parents are still interned. Her brother was recruited into the 442nd out of the camps. So she just finds her way. She actually escapes, and I don't think there were that many people that escaped from the camps, but that was this little twist on the history of the camps. So she gets away, and then she finds her way to Minneapolis, but on a train. She just had a certain amount of money. She was going to the store at the camp with money in her pocket, and then she saw an opportunity to escape. And so she got out of the camps, and then she purchased a ticket on an airplane, don't we wish, on a train. And on the train, she meets a professor, a young woman from the University of Minnesota, and who eventually takes Yasu under her wing, puts her up, lets her share her home with her, and eventually gets her into the University of Minnesota, which was a challenge for this young girl because she did not have any kind of high school documents, no diploma, because they of course, when they were removed from their homes under military guards, they were not allowed to take anything other than 2 bags of clothing, and that was it. And so she left her school and was never able to achieve what she wanted to do, a degree. So Martha helps her through that whole process, and eventually Yasu gets a teaching job, even though she runs into quite a bit of prejudice and difficulties that way, but she manages to eventually get a teaching job.
Wow. And of course, with your own teaching career, you could draw, I think, from your experiences, right?
Exactly. And actually, this book took a little less research because I could do that. And so that was a little easier, but I still had to look up different things like radio programs. And I loved looking at all the background of the 1940s, the culture of the 1940s. And it took me back to the time when I was like late 40s, early 50s, when I was a child. And I get goosebumps right now just thinking about TV being a big deal, brand new into our homes. And so so this book is really filled with a lot of the culture of the 1940s.
Oh, I love it.
The foods.
It's my favorite decade, too, because
absolutely.
I started on television in 1946, 2 years before the entire U.S. got television. It was in New York City, and New York City had only 600 television sets at that time.
Wow.
On my first broadcast, it was with Bill Cullen and John Reed King, and Bill was the announcer. But I think in fact, I wrote about it in the book, but that particular decade, in my opinion, because we transitioned from this incredible president who we had, Franklin Roosevelt, who brought us through the first half of the 40s, to a man who I interviewed, President Truman. And then, but all of a sudden, after these dark war years, everything seemed to blossom, but in a good way. It was a quality way. Levittown, Long Island, for instance, that was the first community that had a whole bunch of homes that people could afford.
That's right.
And I mean, just those little things. And then, of course, the advent of national television with people, including myself, even after I had been on the initial broadcast, standing in front of department store windows or in movie theaters watching Test Pattern. Test Pattern and music. And sometimes it was just Test Pattern.
I have fond memories of my older brother and I sitting in front of the TV in the morning watching the Test Pattern, waiting for the programs to begin. It was so funny. And it was such a novel type of thing for us. It was like huge. I almost thought you could get into the television somehow. It was a big mystery how those people showed up on there.
Well, that's interesting you say that because I think in the book I wrote that when I was a kid and listening to radio programs, dramatic radio programs, we had one of those big radios, of course. I thought, how did those people get inside that radio?
Exactly.
I envisioned all these teeny little people inside the radio. Well, I wasn't the smartest bulb on the
Well,
tree.
I was right in the same category. Absolutely.
Oh my.
They were special times.
They were fabulous. And I remember the first show I remember that intrigued me the most was Kukla, Fran, and Ollie.
Oh, I love that
And
show.
they were phenomenal. They were
Absolutely.
absolutely phenomenal out of Chicago. Oh,
Oh, and the Howdy Doody show. The Howdy
Uh,
Doody.
well, Howdy Doody is in part of my book.
That's right.
Yes.
Yes.
I got
So
to,
you'll,
Gabby Hayes and I were acquaintances during that time
I
when he
rem-
was on Howdy Doody.
absolutely. Yeah. And I cried when Howdy Doody went off the air.
Well, bless your heart.
I was heartbroken.
I just wish it was the 1940s all over again.
I do
And
too.
50s. Yes.
I agree.
So, book number 3
And book
in
number,
this well, it's book number 5 really, but number 3 in this trilogy.
right. And it's called On Liberty's Wings, a post-World War II novel. And of course, it picks up where this one leaves off. And it carries the family into post-World War II America, and where they reunite eventually in a house in North Minneapolis. And I actually used a lot of the photographs. My mother kept a real nice photograph album of the whole history of our family. So from the time we were born in North Minneapolis, I could look at photos as far as types of vehicles, what they looked like. I could see, it was like reliving my history as a child and growing up and having all those black and white photographs, being able to touch them and look at them and get details to help me build, again, the culture of that post-World War II America. And then the schools, I remember going to McKinley Elementary in North Minneapolis as a child. And so the school that YASU teaches in is kind of designed in the way that McKinley was. It was like you walked up several flights of steps and in the front door, and then up more steps and up more steps. So it was one of those really old schools. And so I used that as kind of the setting for a lot of her experiences with teaching.
Did you anticipate when you were beginning the first book that it would evolve into 3 books? And when did you discover the evolution was going to be the catalyst for making it happen?
Well, I thought I was only going to write the 1 book. And what really pushed me to do a sequel to that one was comments from readers. And my husband's read all of my books. And he got to the second one, YASU'S QUEST, and he didn't think I should do any more writing after that one because I'm always in my office typing away or researching. And so I was at a class reunion, and I called him to let him know I was leaving to come home. And he said, Diane, I told you I thought that YASU'S QUEST would be the last book. But he said, I just finished reading it, and I think you need to write the 3rd one. And so, the readers did the same thing. And so that's what was my inspiration. And luckily, the second 2 didn't take quite as much research. Like I said, the first one took 3 years to get it published because of all the background I had to go through in the history of the camps. I did not know much about the camps, so I had to do a lot of thorough history on that and research. And so that helped that the second 2 I really could just kind of pull forward. So this one came out in right after this one. So this took 1 year, and then this took 1 year. So it was a lot quicker process for me. So,
am I mistaken, or were most of the internment camps for the Japanese in California and Arizona?
the majority of them were, but actually my neighbor was the Japanese couple. He was interned in a camp in California, and she was in a camp in Arkansas. Oh, so wow. There were other ones kind of scattered. There's Heart Mountain, I think, also. There's a couple other ones that are scattered in different areas, and there were some up in Canada, too.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I should have brought my map. I have a map. I do a lot of presentations with the book, so I have a lot of artifacts and slides show that I use to show the different locations of the camps. And it was most of the people were in for at least 4 years. High school students who wanted to go on to college could get a grant granted out of the camps if they could find a university that would accept them. So there were, but most of the people were, once they got into the camps, it was about 3 to 4 years that they were there behind barbed wire under military guard.
Wow. So as you said in the beginning, it's very reminiscent of some of the things that are happening today with the children and the immigrants and so forth and so on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What can I say? It's just wonderful that you've written all these. Now, of course, the next question for your readers, and you are award winning. Please tell us about the award.
Okay, several of these books have won awards. This one, On Liberty's Wings, won the Reader's Views Award. It's as the Reader Viewer's Choice Award. And YASU'S Quest was also a Reader's Views Choice Award. And I recently earned the Book Excellence Award on Liberty's Wings also.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, thank you.
That's wonderful. You're welcome. Yeah, so does this mean another book coming?
I don't know if there's another one in the series. Several of the readers have asked if there will be a fourth book, but I have a book in my file that I've had for years. I started it back in 1995 when I had a writers group at that time that met at my house, and it's I don't know if it's a children's book or if it's a humorous adult book, but it's called. It's about a camel cricket. It's called Madison Cricket of the Valley, and it's about a camel cricket that invades this couple's house. And it actually is kind of set in Afton, Minnesota, because when I first moved into the house with my first husband, where we live in Afton up on a bluff, there were all these little brown crickets. They're not small. They're regular size, same as a real black cricket, and they were kind of jumping out of the cupboards, and they were kind of everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
And one morning I found one on my toothbrush, so I started thinking, I think this might be a good book to start writing, so that might be my next project, so we'll see.
Terrific. Well, I can't thank you enough, Diane, and the shameless plug time. My book is available on Amazon, and maybe you can verify that there are a lot of surprises in this book.
Definitely, and like I said, both my husband Alan and I have read the book, and he was so touched by your autograph on there to Alan and the big smiley sunshine on there, because he just loved you as a weather person and still does. And he read it first, and he highly recommended it. He said, "You really need to read Barry's book." So I put my other books away that I was in the middle of, and I started reading it. And from your childhood on, you've had your ups and downs and ins and outs, but boy, I tell you, it's a fascinating read, and I highly recommend it to people. It gives them a background about you, but it also shows so many people that you have touched their lives in a very positive way, and the people you have met, it just amazes me.
Thank you so much. Gotta go. But thank you so much, Diane, and thank you for watching.